are often referred to as the most inappropriate, noobish, and ineffective ways of dealing with the enemy plane. I'm here to break that theory apart. Oh, and thanks for 4,000 subscribers. Now, the theory behind a head-on pass is far more complicated than one might think. There's so many different variables that come into play, where the guns are located, which type of guns they are, the velocity at which they fire. So many different things that we had to consider that really it's impossible to put it all into a quick 7-minute video. So for that instance, I'm going to be leaving the different types of mini variables, as I'm going to call them, to yourself. You're going to have to test them out for yourself, see which aircraft, see which guns work best for your personal type of play. So I'm going to be showing you a few different types of head-on passes, how to perform them, how to evade them, and give you a bit of an understanding behind the idea of a head-on pass, as well as talk a little bit about some tips and tricks that you might have to use, and hopefully at the end of the video you will have a rough understanding of why I perform head-on passes as much as I can, and why I find them to be the most effective ways of dealing with the enemy. Because if a head-on pass is performed correctly, you're going to waste a very small amount of ammunition, you're going to take a very little time doing so, and there are no complicated maneuvers that are actually required to perform one. So a little bit of practice, a few tips that you need to know, and hopefully you'll become a better head-on passer. Okay, now before I can show you how I do my head-on passes and how I make sure that I succeed in them, I want to show you two of the basic types of head-on passes, or two of the basic engagements that we're going to kind of combine together and create a harmony. So yeah, before we go into one of the head-on passes, we actually have to first learn how to not go into one. There are aircraft in this game that you should never go head-on with, like under no circumstance. It's an instant death if you go against them, and I'm not even going to count them. You all know which aircraft I'm talking about. Anything that has big guns, lots of guns, and things that are just completely menacing when they turn those guns at you. Now, different ways that you can evade the enemy are countless. You can roll to the left, you can roll to the right, you can climb up, you can start diving, you can do some split S, you can Immelman, you can apply negative Gs. Really, it's up to you. Anything that makes the enemy's job of trying to put the pipper onto you difficult is a maneuver you want to use. So anything that can make the job harder for him, do it. Now, one of the things people tend to do a lot in playing this game is something that we like to refer to as the full commitment. What they do is, when they engage a head-on pass, they follow a rule, and the rule goes, shoot at the enemy until the enemy is dead. Now, fair enough, what they're going to end up doing is they're going to end up killing whatever they're engaging. Literally, there's very little chance you won't actually end up killing them if you commit. But what you're actually doing with that is you're increasing the chances of you dying as well. You see, there's this little thing I want you to keep in mind. The longer you stay in a head-on position, the longer you engage, the longer you fire, the longer you maintain that single position of attacking them, the more chance you have of hitting, but also the more chance the enemy has of hitting. And so to make sure that the odds are in your favor, you have to be nimble, swift, and quick. Short bursts are the thing that are going to do the job, and evading is a must. So yeah, there are tons of different variables that come into play when you're going head on. Which type of gun should I be using? Which type of tracer belts or stealth belts? What belts should I be using? Should I be using a convergence of 800 or the same that I use, a convergence of 300? How do I aim when the guns are on the bottom of the plane or above the plane? All these things are extremely complicated, and I think you might start to slowly understand the complexity behind the head-on pass. It's not that simple to perform, but when performed correctly, a simple burst can be enough to take down the enemy. There are no maneuvering required to get on their six and try to keep up with them in turns and corkscrews and those type of things. It's a very simple thing. It's not even a new maneuver, it's simply aiming and firing the guns at a specific point, knowing how far the guns are going to drop, where they're going to fire, and what the enemy is going to do. I guess a few of the basic tips that I can give you are the following. If you're using stealth rounds, there is a higher chance that the enemy might not know that you're firing at them. So you're increasing the chance of the surprise attack, but you're also decreasing the chances of actually hitting him unless you're extremely comfortable with firing your guns. Another thing you might have to know is if the guns are mounted in the wings. Basically, here's the rule. With wing-mounted guns, you're most likely to actually hit the enemy, but you're less likely to actually execute them. With nose-mounted guns, the story is the opposite. There's a high chance of actually destroying them, but there's a smaller chance of hitting them because there isn't that much spread. Also, depending on the muzzle velocity of different types of shells, you have to understand that certain shells you're going to have to lead more, for example the 30mm that the ME262 has, and on certain cannons you have to lead barely any, considering that the muzzle velocity is so much greater, for example the F2 Sabre. Also, the guns that are mounted on the bottom of the fuselage require you to aim slightly higher, and if guns are placed on top of the fuselage, you usually have to aim slightly lower than normally. So yeah, hopefully this video gave you a bit of an understanding why I perform head-on passes, why I think they're actually the most efficient ways of dealing with the enemy and the easiest ways as well, and hopefully you got an understanding of, you know, what type of maneuvers I perform in order to get there and to succeed at what I'm doing. I think that pretty much wraps up the video. Now keep in mind, practice makes master. You're going to have to perform a lot of these. You're going to have to die a lot of times, but I'm pretty sure that if you keep at it, you're going to eventually get, well, just as good as me. So yeah, thanks for watching. I've got some amazing content prepped up for you in hopefully the next few weeks. But until next time guys, have fun, safe flying, and remember rule number 1. I'm used to planes turn fighting when it comes to Japanese, and now I have to use a Japanese plane in a way that's not turn fighting. And turn fighting is great because you can use those less powerful guns. They're great guns, you can see right there, the Spitfire was completely wrecked, but they're not as powerful, right, as for example something like Focke gets, or even the P-47 gets a lot more of those kind of machine guns. And so usually that's where Japanese fighters are good. They have weaker